Hello, friends. Welcome to another astrology forecast with Jay, an astrology forecast, if you will. Today, we're going to chat about Uranus in Gemini. This is kind of a big fucking deal. It is like the last big thing to happen in the cosmos in 2025. 2025 is kind of a big deal for astrology. There's a lot of planets on the move, a lot of like the big movers and shakers that don't move around a lot have all shifted. So late last year, November 2024, we had Pluto make its final ingress into Aquarius, where it's going to be until about 2044. Then back in March of 2025, Neptune made its first ingress into Aries. It's going to pop back into Pisces for a little bit and then settle into Aries for about 14-ish years in January of 2026. Saturn is also kind of on the move, going back and forth between Aries and Pisces. It will settle into Aries for about 2.5 years in February of 2026. And then we also had Jupiter change signs recently, moving into Cancer for the next 12 months. And then by April next year, Uranus will be fully moved into Gemini. It's going to spend just a couple of months in Gemini right now. But the point being, like, the astrological playing field by April 2026 is just completely different than anything we've had for the past 14-ish years. So, yeah, it's a big deal. And sometimes I hesitate talking about the outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, when they are just first making their initial ingress into a sign, because typically they'll move into a new sign, they'll hang out there for a little bit, then they'll retrograde back into the previous sign for a couple more months, and then they make their final ingress into that new sign a couple months later. And so this time period is really more like a sneak preview. I mean, it's more than that. It's more than the teaser trailer. It's really like the full length trailer because it is a couple of months time. But anyways, it's not the full idea, but I also think it's kind of good to know what is approaching and like kind of get a feel for things so that once we get to that totally new astrological landscape in 2026, we're a little bit more prepared for it. So, let's talk Uranus, let's talk Gemini, let's talk Uranus and Gemini, and then I've got a couple of fun things for the end of the video. I mean, the whole thing will be fun in my opinion, hopefully in your opinion too, but then we're going to talk about some people that have Uranus or that had Uranus and Gemini, and I think they're pretty cool. Okay, let's get acquainted with Uranus. I know what you're thinking. Uranus. I know. Come on, laugh it up. It's funny. It's funny. It's good. So, the way I like to explain this quirky little planet, who, by the way, if Uranus had a personality, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't mind being called Uranus. It just kind of feels like that kind of character because it's quirky. It's funny. It's having a good time. It's having a laugh. But the way I like to explain what Uranus means in terms of astrology actually relates to its finding, its sort of astronomical roots. And it was discovered in 1781, and it was the first new planet to be discovered in a hell of a long time. For a very, very, very long time, we thought that we just had those five original planets plus the sun plus the moon, and that Saturn was the end. Saturn was the wall. Saturn was the boundary. Saturn was the final frontier of space. Like that was it. Saturn was the final planet. And then all of a sudden, we have the technology to be able to see planets without just the naked eye, because of course we can only see up to Saturn with the naked eye. We need some piece of technology to be able to see beyond that. And so all of a sudden that gets developed and boom, Uranus. What's up? Right? So it changed the game. It shifted the playing field. It was a paradigm shift in terms of like what is out there, because it's like, holy shit, if that's there, what else might be out there? Right? So Uranus is about discovery. It's about something that's groundbreaking, something that completely shifts our understanding of the structures that have been in place. It's a bit of a curveball. It's about the unexpected. It's experimental. It's innovative. It's about what is beyond the boundary. So it's also about freedom and liberation and going outside of the normal trajectory and being able to break free of patterns and traditions and norms and all of those things that keep us kind of boxed in, locked in patterns and routines that are stagnant and old and outdated and no longer serving us. We can break away from tradition and forge a new path. Uranus is very rebellious in that way. It's countercultural, it's going against the grain. When we are having a Uranus transit, so if it's, triggering one of your natal planets or maybe a natal angle or something like that, it can be associated with times of restlessness and boredom and impatience and maybe even a little bit of impulsivity because of that impatience. But there's this feeling of restriction and this need to be like, I need to get out of this. Like, I am feeling so boxed in, so locked in, so limited, and I need to step outside of this comfort zone. I need to break down this boundary in order to find what is beyond it and perhaps move towards something that feels more authentically me. The gift of a Uranus transit, despite how chaotic and destabilizing and explosive at times it can be, it really depends on what planets or angles it's interacting with. But certainly the kind of awakening and the kind of like paradigm shifts that Uranus can bring aren't little walks in the park. They are life changing. They can be life changing, but they typically push us whether we want to or not, usually not, but there is a gift. The gift is that we move towards authenticity. We move towards individuality and originality. We move towards our unique selves. And I think that Uranus transits get better with age because when we're younger, oftentimes we are seeking to be, we don't want to stand out. We want to be like everybody else. God forbid we are not on trend or doing what our classmates and peers are doing. Like, we just want to fit in, right? But Uranus is all about, no, 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 baby. Let that freak flag fly. Be yourself. Be so unapologetically yourself. I really think Uranus is very queer coded. And I think if you are ever looking for, queerness in the chart, I think, I start with Uranus anyways. To me, Uranus is what's outside the binary. Okay, so what about Gemini? Well, Gemini is our mutable air sign. So that means that Gemini energy is very changeable and adaptable. It's flexible, it's fluid, it's a shapeshifter, it's a chameleon. I really feel that pure Gemini energy could converse with anyone about anything, even if they know nobody or nothing about the situation, because they just know how to ask the right question. They know how to pull information out of people because there's this genuine interest in the exchange of information and in being able to understand where the other person is coming from or to understand the subject at hand until the Gemini knows how to relate to it, because they will have some sort of other experience or other conversation in the back of their head that's like, oh yeah, no, I get it because this is like this. There's that genuine interest in the exchange of information, in knowing what other people think. It's a very, very social sign. It's great at networking. It's so great at connecting this person with that person or this group with that person or these groups together, because somehow the Gemini brain just sees like how those groups or those people or those like two bits of information, whatever it might be, are just going to work together so much better than they would separately. They just like see how that cohesion can make things just magical. There is a real curiosity with Gemini. There's always this desire for more information, for more input, and it will seek it out as much as possible. Gemini can get bored very easily. It does prefer to multitask. It prefers to be able to dip in over here, then dip in over there, then dip in up here, then dip in down there. It wants to dip it. It's the pollinator, right? Like, it wants to move from plant to plant to plant to plant. It's got to be on the move. It wants to do lots of different things. It's a mutable sign, like I said, and mutable signs come at the end of a season of nature. So Gemini is what connects spring to summer in the northern hemisphere anyway. So mutable signs contain multitudes. They are both and. They're yes and, but also both and many other things too. One of my close Gemini friends always has the advice of like, you can do multiple things, but you don't have to do all the things. Like you could pare it down to two things. But I think that is a struggle for Gemini energy. There's also a very playful and youthful quality to Gemini. I think it's a bit cheeky. I think they know how to have a good laugh. And I think that they're always just down to give it a go. Like, just give it a shot. Why not? Let's see what happens. Because we'll probably learn something fascinating along the way. Okay, so what about Uranus in Gemini? How do we know what's going to happen? And I mean, to be real, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I've never been alive during a Uranus and Gemini transit. The last time it happened was in the 40s, the 1940s. So it's not that we can't look back on that transit and sort of extrapolate and say, like, here are the possibilities. We can also just sort of mix and mash the things that we know about Uranus with the things that we know about Gemini, and we can make predictions from there. And I think those are useful, and I am going to share some of my ideas with you. But Uranus is also about expecting the unexpected, and it's about surprises and things that are shocking. And I say we'll figure it out as we go, and we will learn as we go. Important, I think, to pay attention to these next couple of months. Uranus moves into Gemini on July 7th, by the way. I don't think I've said that. July 7th, 2025 is the first ingress. It's going to dip back into Taurus during its retrograde on November 7th. And then by the end of April 2026, it's going to be back in Gemini, and it's going to stay there for about 7-ish years. So that's the data and the details of the transit, which, Gemini would appreciate and thank us for. Gemini loves the details. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So we can also think about Uranus interacting with Mercury, and we can kind of just extrapolate from there. So like Uranus and Gemini could really be about a major shift in mindset and perspective, right? A total paradigm shift of the way that we think about things, the way that we see things. This idea that no idea is fully right or is all encompassing, that there are multiple possibilities for things, multiple things can be true at once, and kind of how do we live with that understanding? How do we sort of like internalize and reconcile the fact that there are always multiple truths to things, that there is sort of an open-endedness to ideas and thinking, and being open to allowing information and new experiences to shift our understanding. And it's not about being naive or being gullible and pulling the wool over our eyes, but it's actually about critical thinking and going like, okay, I can actually release myself from the rigidity of that perspective and be able to see that there is something else outside of that. And this new experience or this new awakening that I can't unsee has actually shown that to me, and it's okay for me to shift my thinking. I feel as though there will be changes to social media, changes in the ways that we communicate with each other in general. I mean, changes even to what language is potentially, and like what are thoughts and what are ideas and how do we express ourselves. I think we could see changes in education, and hopefully that means that we're ditching old and outdated systems of education. I mean, I wonder if there will be any changes to like credentials and like degrees and schooling in general. Like, what will it even mean to know something? Like, I mean, can we shift and change the like standardization of schooling and testing and kind of make a space that is more inclusive for all types of learners, for all types of people, for all types of minds? We've already seen some changes in education, and sometimes it's really bad. So hopefully these ones are good. I mean, that's what I would put out into the universe, is that the changes of education is good and for the better and makes things more inclusive and makes us better thinkers, more compassionate thinkers. I think we could see quite rapid evolutions in technology. I mean, Gemini, both Mercury and Uranus have some linking to technology. I sort of feel like Uranus is a very quick planet, and Gemini is also very buzzy, very speedy. So I wonder if like the output of technology feels faster than we can possibly keep up with, which feels wild to say based on how technology has changed just even in the past 10 years. But I feel like we're gonna be like the output is gonna be so rapid that like a lot of ideas get trashed or something. Like not everything gets made. There's more ideas than possible actions that could be taken. Mercury is also responsible for transportation, so there could be massive changes in the ways that we travel, especially like short distance travel. So, I mean, hello, Back to the Future. Are we finally seeing hoverboards and flying cars? Maybe. I also feel like things are going to be changing so much because we also have Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto is this planet of like deep transformation, and Aquarius is another air sign. So I just feel like transportation, aviation, just the ways that we move and get around, the ways that we move through the world could be really shifting and changing over the next 7/20 years. And to stay on that note of Uranus and Pluto both being in air signs, these big collective energy, decades defining, generations defining planets in air signs, how much we're just going to see a shift in maybe like the decentralization of power, the dispersal of power, things moving back to more local levels, just changes, shifts in the dynamic of power. A freedom from the current like masses of wealth and power and oligarchy, like getting rid of that, busting it. Fucking, I hope so. Perhaps a dispersal of the wealth, and whether that's monetarily, like actual wealth in that way, or if that means information and more access to information for everybody. In general, I think it's the age of a lot of information, like TMI, like too much information maybe, because the speed of Uranus and the buzzy speed of Gemini and the fact that it is the pollinator, I mean, I feel like, again, social media, the ways in which we communicate with one another, there's just going to be a ton of information flying around. What's real? What's fake? What's useful? What's not? I mean, what do we do with all of this information? Is it useful? Uranus is linked to the myth of Prometheus, and Prometheus was this figure that stole fire from the gods and gave it to the humans, and fire can represent knowledge and intelligence. And Prometheus was very punished for this, but he thought it was worth it for the people to have access in the same way that the gods did. So, a lot of information and a lot of important information, but a lot of information nonetheless, and some sort of awakening, some sort of new power. I mean, power comes through information too, right? So, and then, with that in mind, the speediness of things, the overwhelming nature of certain things, I think this could be a really overstimulating time for our brains, for our nervous systems. We need to figure out ways of moving all of that energy, up and out, up and through and out of the body, and taking extra care of our mental health and getting a good amount of rest and logging off and going and feeling the grass between our toes every so often, I think is going to be especially important. And breathing exercises, I feel, will be key. Okay, and now for the fun stuff, which I realized, did I hype this up? Is this only going to be fun for me? I thought it would be fun to take a look at some people that had Uranus and Gemini just to get an extra flavor profile, basically. So the first person that I want to talk about is David Lynch, who is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, a constant inspiration. Really, the thing that I find so Uranian about him is that he, with specifically his work in Twin Peaks, just told me that like being weird is okay, and it's actually very cool, and it makes you who you are. So do not be afraid to be weird, and just go as hard as you can into that, because we have but one life, and be weird with it. Get weird. But David Lynch was an incredible filmmaker. He was innovative, experimental, he was a visionary. I mean, often when I would watch his work, I would just be thinking, Where did that idea come from? What part of his brain brought him this? Like, was he in a fever dream? Where does this shit come from? He was so unconventional and surprising and unexpected, and he really challenged the status quo in terms of what filmmaking was and is and what storytelling is. I mean, if you want to talk about narratives that don't follow a narrative structure, it's David Lynch, and he still managed to tell fantastic stories, but in his own way, in a way that nobody was doing before. And then when people started to do it, started to try to emulate his style, it was often and still often is described as Lynchian, because the best way to describe those people's works was to call it like it is. It's Lynchian. They're doing what David Lynch did, or they're trying to anyway. Some people to more success than others, because his work was so unique and unlike anything else. Like I said, unexpected, unpredictable. I still remember watching Twin Peaks: The Return in 2017 as it was airing live and just going, I have no idea what's going to happen on this episode. I literally have no idea. I know what happened last week and the week before, but it doesn't matter. Anything could happen tonight. And the excitement that that brought me week to week, just not knowing and just loving to expect the unexpected. I mean, if you've ever seen Eraserhead, it is the most bonkers what the fuck thing you'll ever see. It's shocking. And I think his work in general was destabilizing in that Uranian way, because it really stirs something up inside of you. You're not the same after you watch something from David Lynch, and that seems hyperbolic, but it's not. It makes you think about things in a different way. Something else I loved about him too is that he just didn't feel the need to explain his work. He didn't feel like he had to prove himself in any way, or defend isn't the right word, but really just, he let the work speak for itself. It was what it was, and if you didn't like it, you didn't like it, and that's fine. I don't think Uranus ever looks... I don't think Uranus is here to make friends, actually. What I find especially fascinating about Uranus and David Lynch's chart is that it was in his 8th house. Fellow Scorpio rising, no big deal. Which is the place of death, fear, anxiety, grief, loss, decay, the psyche, repressed memories. I mean, it is a dark place in the chart. It is a place that exists in all of our lives to some extent or another. Some people, maybe if you have a lot of planets there, it's going to be more expressed in your life, but certainly it was for David Lynch. Much of his work was uncomfortable and would take you to uncomfortable places and would explore uncomfortable topics. And he was usually going to places with his narratives and with his visuals that nobody else wanted to go to, that other people wouldn't have dared go to before he sort of paved the way for them to do so. He wanted to make us aware of what wasn't always visible or obvious, but what was really powerful and potent. And I just love the way he sort of would shock our systems and be like, oh, you awake now? Yeah, you paying attention? I also, Uranus is very electric, and I often think about how Twin Peaks: The Return ends with this like jolt of electricity, and it just feels so Uranian to me. And I also want to talk about Marsha P. Johnson. So recently I was listening to a podcast called Gender Spiral, which is an amazing podcast. You should absolutely check it out. But they had an author, the author Tourmaline, on to talk about her new biography of Marsha P. Johnson. And the way that she spoke about Marsha made me have to know her birth chart. Like, I was just like, okay, what are all these placements that makes a person so influential, so groundbreaking? The way that Tourmaline was talking about Marsha was like, she's this innovator. She dreamt about what else was possible for the LGBTQ plus community. She saw beyond the limitations and restrictions that had been placed upon her communities. And not only that, she lived very unapologetically as herself. She pushed boundaries in terms of her own identity, but she also pushed back on the boundaries that were placed upon her communities. And so I had to look up the birth chart. Unfortunately, there's no birth time, or at least not a reputable one that I could find. If I'm wrong, please hit me up in the comments. Nothing I could find, but Uranus was in Gemini. It was smack dab in the middle of Gemini when she was born. So she for sure had Uranus and Gemini. And that just made me so happy. I just loved that. And she's a Virgo, which makes total sense because, like, I swear Virgos are the most thoughtful. Just when you need something done, you call a Virgo because you're going to get it done and you're going to get it done right. But for those of you who might not know, Marsha P. Johnson was this incredibly prominent, incredibly important, incredibly influential figure in the LGBTQ plus rights movement. And she paved the way for so many of us today and, was highly inspirational during her time and still is today with the legacy that she leaves behind. But one of the things that I loved learning about in this interview was this association that she created called STAR, which is an acronym, but just it was called STAR, and as an astrologer, that just melts my little heart. But among other things, it was dedicated to offering housing for transgender and gender nonconforming folks, and like that didn't really exist before she created this. And it wasn't just her; it was her and several people that organized this, but she was really kind of in the forefront, kind of leading it. And yeah, the housing just didn't exist before. It's something that is, more common these days, and obviously the rights of LGBTQ plus people are still very much in danger and still very much in jeopardy. And there's a lot of fight left to do, but there was a lot of fighting done in the late 60s and 70s and 80s and ongoing. But Marsha was a big part of Stonewall and then everything that happened afterwards. And especially with this STAR housing, like she just saw what was in need for her community and created it. She innovated it. She experimented until she got it right. And she was doing that with her looks, with her fashion too. I mean, she was stepping outside of what was even safe at the time and what is still unfortunately not safe now. But she chose to live as herself. I mean, to live on the margins, on the outside, as many queer people still do. But this is why I say Uranus is queer coded, because it pushes against the status quo. It challenges societal norms, just as I think queer people do. And so I wonder if, like, Uranus and Gemini is broad brushstroke broad brushstrokes here. I sort of got it. You know what I'm saying. But I wonder if it's a time that might teach us that perhaps the most dangerous thing is inauthenticity. Like, the truth is sacred and bold, and truth is freedom. And to be daring and brave enough to live in our truth is maybe the point of it all. Let's have a think on that, huh? Let's have a ponder. Inauthenticity, perhaps the most dangerous thing. Let's be ourselves. Let's be as weird as we can fucking get. I mean, as weird as we want to be, right? Like, just be yourself. Be yourself as much as possible. I think that's always the lesson with a Uranus transit. And with Uranus and Gemini, it's like, can we shift the way that we have been thinking about things? Like, can our own brain help to set us free? What have we been thinking is the only way to do something? What, like, little boxes and little restrictions and little boundaries have we made for ourselves with the ways that we think about things, with the ways that we perceive things? And how can we shift and step away from that and allow ourselves some freedom to think about things differently, to see it differently, to see it in a way that we never fucking thought possible, but actually frees us and allows us to live as our authentic selves? Maybe? Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the chat. Let me know what you think about Uranus and Gemini. Where's Gemini in your chart? How is Uranus and Taurus for you? I'd love to hear about all of it. And I'll be back soon. I can't believe I forgot this on the last video, but I'll be back soon with more astrology insights and other cosmic chit chat. But until then, I'll catch you in the cosmos.